in the Gemara, what the issue here in the Gemara is. As you know, the Torah has um, many laws regarding tumah, contamination. Correct? That we all know about coming in contact with. Morning, Richie. Boker Tov. We know about a person coming in contact with a dead body, or coming in contact, or a person in a tent of a dead body. That person becomes contaminated as a result of that type of connection with the dead body, right? We know the Torah has the laws of paraduma, of the red heifer, that you go ahead and you take a red cow, it has to be perfectly red, and you slaughter it, you burn it, take the ashes and you mix it with certain water, and you sprinkle it on the person who became contaminated. There's a process, the 7-day process. On the third day and the seventh day, you sprinkle from the ashes onto the person, and that is part of the way to purify. Good morning, Mark. How are you? Morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Yeah, so the Gemara, Mark, has been a lot of discussion about contamination in garments in different areas of the Torah. What type of garments? We spoke about it last week, and the Gemara continues a whole long Gemara on this subject. So just to bring everybody up to date. So the Torah has many laws regarding contamination. A person could become contaminated through a dead body. A person could be contaminated through certain dead animals, dead carcass. A person could be. Then we have to see exactly which. The classic case of the Torah is you have an animal that's a kosher animal, and it wasn't slaughtered properly. If it's slaughtered properly, so then it does not have the ability to contaminate it. But if it wasn't slaughtered properly, if it was a nevela, an animal that's not slaughtered properly, that animal has the ability to give off contamination if you come in contact with that dead animal that was not slaughtered. And then we have certain animals, then we have certain discharges that if a person that could contaminate, good morning, Simon, will contaminate person, make a person tummy that would require the mikvah, even just having a relation with one's wife creates a certain contamination. They have contamination of sarat in the story of leprosy, right? You have a person has a discoloring on his body, and now for our Gemara purposes, we talk about a certain colors going on a garment, that discoloring of a garment that could contaminate the garment. So that's we have regarding, and then we have another area, sherets. Sherets is like these 8 teeming animals. Some, one of them is an akbar. One of them is which seems to translate as a mouse. One of those type of animals, if they're dead and they come in contact with a person, they will contaminate the person. So there are many different forms of contamination. In our Gemara, what our Gemara was discussing was forms of things that became contaminated. And when the Torah talks about leprosy, the Torah talks about wool and linen having morning. The Gemara talks about wool and linen. If there's leprosy on a garment that's wool or linen, and the Gemara based on that, Rabbi Yishmael said that many places in the Torah it says the word beged, it says garment, right? It says like we spoke about last week about tzitzit. It says al kanfei bigdehem. It says on the corners of your garment. The Torah did not identify what is the material of your garment that we're referring to, that you have an obligation to put on tzitzit if it's a 4-cornered garment. In the Torah, in one place, the Torah, at least so far, the Gemara brought one place so far, we'll see more. The Torah identifies what a beged is. When the Torah spoke about the laws of leprosy, the Torah goes out of its way and it mentions the word beged, and it mentions semer upishtim, wool or linen. And the Gemara says from that is a source. Abaye says that wherever the Torah says the word beged, it needs to be wool and linen. If it's not, that's what the Torah is talking about. When he uses the word beged, that's the identification, that's a translation of the word beged. Therefore, for us, a practical nafkamina would be that would be no Torah obligation to put on tzitzis other than a garment that's made out of wool or linen. If it's not made out of wool or linen, it's not a beged. It's not big dehem. That's why Richie in the Shulchan Aruch, Morning Levi, the Mechaber Rav Yosef Karo says only a garment made out of wool or linen would have a Torah obligation of tzitzit. Other garments, other four-corner garments, will be a rabbinic obligation. You want to fulfill the biblical obligation, you got to have wool and linen. And we said the Ashkenaz rabbi, the Ramah says, others disagree and say even if it's made out of other materials, even if it's not wool or linen, it will be subject to the Torah obligation of tzitzit. So that's the practical application for us. But so we see this. So therefore, our Gemara is discussing this law of contamination. Is it limited to? Is this idea of contamination by all the? Let's talk about someone comes into a tent of a dead body, or if the sheriff, these teeming animals, let's say a dead mouse touches a garment, does the garment have to be wool and linen for it to be subject to those laws of contamination? It seems by leprosy, the Torah is very, very clear. By leprosy, so far that leprosy, the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that it has to be wool and linen. It identifies it in two places. In two places it mentions the word wool and linen, and therefore the Gemara, so far we are under the impression that leprosy has to be wool and linen. But what about other forms of contamination? Do they have to be wool or linen? So to that we have a dispute between Abaye and Rava and how to understand Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, there's an opinion of Rava that says he would agree if the garment is 12 fingers by 12 fingers, 3 tfachim, a tefach is 4 fingers, right? If you have 4 of these fingers, that's 4 by 4. So if you have 12 fingers by 12 fingers, that size of a garment, Rava goes on record to say that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would hold it would be subject to contamination. So and he brings a pasuk, and the Gemara said that there's a special pasuk by sherets, by these teeming animals, that there's a word o, and the extra word he understands is coming to teach us to include, meaning it says the word beged, it says the word garment by sherets, and we already established that garment means wool and linen from leprosy, but he has a special extra word by the sherets, by the teeming animals, let's say we'll call it, by the mouse, those mouse type of animals, that they will also receive contamination even if they are not wool and linen. So that no, they don't need to be worn in the bottom. No. Right. A dead one of these dead animals, right, come in contact with the garment. But the question is, what's the size of the garment comes into play. Because so far we found that woolen linen is such a significant garment, it's such an important garment. So then even if it's 3 fingers by 3 fingers, very small, it could be used for a patch. 3 fingers by 3 fingers, maybe something like this type of card, but you could use it as a patch. Maybe that, if it's wool or linen, it would go ahead and receive contamination. But if it's not wool and linen, then you might need 12 fingers, 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, according to Reuven. So that was our discussion. Morning, Ronnie. So that was our discussion till now. Is any time the Torah talks about a garment and all the different places of contamination, whether it's a tenth of a dead body or the teeming animals, does it have to be wool and linen? Is it limited to wool and linen? Until now, we had the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael that we understood that Rabbi Yishmael holds that it's only wool and linen. There's no other type of material that will be received contamination across the board in all areas of the Torah, wherever the Torah talks about contamination. With that backdrop, that Rabbi Yishmael is only wool and linen, nothing else. So now the Gemara is going to, Abaye says, you know what? I have a contradiction. Well, not only a contradiction, I have one statement from the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael, and I got another statement from the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael. I got two different statements, and he says that these two statements are not in agreement with each other. They're contradictory statements, and that's the observation of Abaye. Maybe different rabbis in the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael are arguing, and that's why there's two different statements in the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael coming out of the yeshiva. But that's what the Gemara, that's what we're up to today on. That's the intro. We're in a very complex Gemara here, not the Tana, right? Our opinion of the Tana. What is the opinion of the Tana of the Tana of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael? What is the opinion of the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael's Academy that it's only wool and linen that could be subject to contamination across the board in all areas of contamination, whether it's a dead body, whether it's leprosy, whether it's sheretz, or he agrees that there is, in certain cases, let's say, if not in leprosy, but other cases, maybe other types of materials in other cases of contamination would be subject to contamination. And that's the Abaye is noting that there seems to be a contradiction coming out of the yeshiva of the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael. Amar Abaye, that's where we start today, the top of 27A2, with that intro. Amar Abaye, Abaye says, Hi Tana, the Bei Rabbi Yishmael. The following, the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael, this Tana, the Tana of Bei Rabbi Yishmael, let me catch it in my Gemara over here. This Tana that we mentioned before, that says that went on record that the only thing that could be the only thing that's included in beged and garments only wool and linen. That Tana is mapik. He goes against the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael. The other Tana, the other rabbi coming out from the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael. The Tani Rabbi Yishmael. Here the Gemara shows how they're not in sync, the two different Tanoim. The Tani Rabbi Yishmael, in the Breita Rabbi Yishmael, he says the following. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to Hillel and Joseph and family. It says by sheretz, it says by these teeming animals like the mouse, these type of animals, when they're dead, if they come in contact with a beged, a garment. Beged, ainli ella beged semu pishtim. The word beged, we've established the word beged means wool and linen, right, Simon? So I will only know wool and linen, and those are the only things that are included in garment. Minayin l'rabot semegmalim. How do we know to include the wool, camel wool? You know, when you shear the hair from the camel, I mean, maybe everybody could tell me. I don't know. They're using the camel wool in the industry, and it's not so well used in the industry. How do we know if you wool that comes from camels here, or semar novim, rabbits here, we know about rabbits here. I think it's a little more common. Notza shel izim. How do we know about goats here? You know that people they use that. You know, it's wool. You know, they use it as goats here. Shirayin. How do we know silk or kalach? Kalach is also from the silk family. Vasrikin, and also different types of silk. How do we know that it's not limited to wool and linen? Right? It says that word beged. We've already established that the word beged means wool and linen. That's what we established by leprosy. That the leprosy that the Torah says for it to receive, for a garment that receives the contamination of leprosy has a discoloring, we establish it's wool and linen. So now it says the word beged by the shrotzim. It says beged by these teeming animals, by let's say by the mouse. So how do we know to include other types of material? Good morning, Mark. Good morning. So how do we know to include other types of material? So the Gemara says, he likes the coffee, I think, over there. So the Gemara says, Tamulama o beged. The word o. The Torah did not need to write the word o. When the Torah talks about the sheretz, the teeming animal going on to a garment, it could have said mikol kli eitz ubeged ve'or. Didn't have to say o. The extra o, the Gemara says, or is an addition. Yes.
Why do you care that it will be contaminated? You know, wear.
You could wear linen. The only thing we talk about linen, you could wear linen. When we talk about linen, the issue is the four-cornered garment. Is it talking about when we get into that question of linen and tzitzit? That's what a four-cornered garment. But we're talking about a garment, a linen garment, nothing to do with tzitzit.
Linen and wool. I mean, linen and wool separately or linen and wool together?
But when it says linen or when we talk of oral wool, correct? Right. What I mean to say the linen and wool mean that those two types of garments, right? We're not talking about them mixed together. That would be a different good point. Good, right? But we're talking about just independently a garment made out of wool, correct? Or a garment made out of linen. Yes, I appreciate that clarification. What is he? Right. What is he? Right. He. Right.
They are giving on different words. He's adding this word.
Right. Very good. So Richie said there's another Gemara. Right. There's another Gemara. Richie says, listen, the word is extra. The word is extra. You can't deny. So the Gemara, there's another Gemara that says he uses the obeged. The Gemara asks you a question, and he uses it to tell us that even a even a small, right, even short, even a three finger wool garment, meaning if you would say a wool garment could be contaminated, you would say maybe it has to be a larger size. So now he says that as long as it meets a minimum of a size of a patch, even 3 fingers by 3 fingers, that's what it's coming to include, according to other opinion. But this opinion says that he has an obeged, and that obeged, that extra or is including other types of garments. 27A1, right. 27A1, sorry, A2, I'm sorry, A2. We just finished the first paragraph. That is, so that is the Gemara's, that's a Abaye's observation. So Abaye's observation is that there is a contradiction between this rabbi and that in Rabbi Yishmael, this Tana of Rabbi Yishmael's Academy and that Tana, Morning Adam, is that there is a contradiction in their opinion.
What the word all comes from.
Right.
These garments of all these materials.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So, right. So right. So last week we brought Rabbi Yishmael that he went on record that's only wool or linen. That we had on record that he has a breita that says that the Torah says the word wool garment, and then it says the word wool and linen. So he says mal halan, just like over there is wool linen. Also, everywhere also has to be wool and linen. That's how we understood him until now, and therefore there's a contradiction. Now comes Rava, and Rava says, you know what? There's no contradiction. He doesn't have any contradiction. Why? What does Rava say? Rava says, Ki letle lahach tana de Rabbi Yishmael. When Rava says, when we mentioned earlier, the first recording from the first Tana from the Beit Midrash Rabbi Yishmael, and we're on 2782, first column, Rava Amar. When did he say his law? Bishar begodim. When did he say Ki letle Tana Rabbi Yishmael bishar begodim? When we said that if it's other types of garments, Rabbi Yishmael will hold it's not subject to contamination. It's only a small shear, sholosh al sholosh. But if it's shlosha al shlosha, but if the garment is more significant, 3 tfachim, 12 fingers by 12 fingers, maybe something more like this size of a garment, not this size of a garment. This size, if it's not wool or linen, if it's wool or linen, this could receive contamination, wool or linen. If it's other types of material, if it's silk, bigger, has to be bigger. That's what he's saying. That's the difference. When Rabbi Yishmael says that garments made out of non-wool wool in it, it's not subject to contamination, they're not subject. That's when they're this, but not when they're this. Not wool and linen. This will not become contaminated. Meaning, if it's wool or linen, this will become contaminated. You could use this as a patch. The poor people will use it as a patch. That's enough. But if it's not wool linen, it needs to be bigger. And as long as it's this size, so to speak, 12 inches, 12 fingers by 12 fingers, then he would agree it would be subject to contamination. So now there is because of the type of material, right? Content of material, and therefore, by the way, someone asked me yesterday to check some shotness. I brought a shotness for somebody, and let's look at the content. What is it made out of? What is it? The poly. The guy said, Rabbi, I didn't look at it beforehand. He said, if there's no wool in the garment, there's nothing to talk about. Right. There's nothing to check. The guy, 3 of the 4 things were nothing in the thing was wool. The suit was wool. Okay, so thank God, but he's checking the suit. But the other things, you gotta look at the content. What's in the right. But sometimes they have the linen in the collar, and but the suit. But even if there's linen in the collar.
No.
Only if it's wool. Only if it's wool. If it's wool. Right. Exactly. Right. We all know the irony. The more expensive the suit, the more likely it has shotness. That's the irony. Because why? Because they
always.
Say it again. Serve it. Like you have to watch out. Zara, Boss. You have to watch certain brands. You have to watch out. One guy gets. Right. You should know that there's even a German hat that has shotness. So the Shotness Laboratory, they had a hat that made in Germany and had shotness. One letter in the hat. That was, but someone from here, from the shul, gave me a coat. I don't know if it was a Zara coat. like a $2,000 coat to bring in, had shatnez in the collar. Very,
Zara coats are not
maybe it wasn't Zara. Was there, give me another name.
$1,000.
Maybe some other. It was something. I don't even know. Yeah, it was something with a very expensive coat.
Okay.
But that's the irony. The more expensive it has, the more likely they're going to put some linen in the collar to give it that stiff. The cheaper garments, they don't put the. You can tell me about it. You guys, okay. Getting back to the Gemara, so Rava says there's no contradiction because Rabbi Yishmael that says if it's not wool and linen, it doesn't receive contamination. That's because he was talking about this size, small 3 by 3 fingers by 3 fingers.
So he holds only wool.
Again, until now, we understood only wool and linen, Rabbi Yishmael. Now, Rava says it's
So
not
you're also saying the small one doesn't get contaminated, needs to be good.
for other materials, right? Right. Meaning he does agree that other materials will be subject to contamination. That
Only
is
large.
only large. Has to be right. How large it is, right. So that's a game changer. Because now we're saying that Rabbi Yishmael would agree that it's not only wool or linen that's subject to contamination, it could be non-wool and linen as long as it meets the size. And therefore, now there's no contradiction.
Everyone agrees
Smaller non will not receive contamination. And now, even though Rabbi Yishmael said before, if it's not wool and linen, it's not receiving contamination. He only meant if it's a small size. That's what he meant. He didn't clarify himself. He meant the small size, in contrast to wool or linen, where the small size would receive contamination. But he agrees if it's a large size, it would receive contamination. So now that you find another brighter that he says, I have a pasuk that adds on silk and other materials, because that's talking about the large size. That's the large size. So there is no contradiction in the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. They're in sync. There's no argument, and that's great. We have no argument. So the Gemara shoots back. Well, what do you mean? Earlier, that's how Rava himself said that Rabbi Yishmael did not make any difference of size. It's never, if it's not wool or linen, it's not going to contaminate. So now you just told me it's all about the size. But beforehand you told me that Rabbi Yishmael says it's not about the size, it's about the content, about the material. So the Gemara says Rava changed his mind. And by the way, it's not like the politicians in Washington. The politicians in Washington in general, when they make a debate, they keep whatever their position is, as long as because they have their own agendas a lot of times. But in Torah, it's all about the emet. So if I feel that I have to change my mind, I'm going to change my mind. If I feel that I see it, you can see Rabbi Vadia Yosef. Sometimes one time earlier in life, he might have said a certain position. Later in life, he said a different position. He has a right to change his position. Yeah. So that's what the Gemara says. And that's what the Gemara says. Look at the top of 27a2, top right corner. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Rava, who the Amma, Rava says, shlosha b'shar begodim. Rava said if it's 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, 12, this is the large size, 12 fingers by 12 fingers. He said, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, only Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar would say it's subject to contamination. But Latana de Rabbi Yishmael, but that's the economy, the Tana from the Midrash Rabbi Yishmael. Letley does not hold of contamination over there. And now you're telling me he would hold of contamination. So the Gemara says, Hada be Rava mehi. Rava changed his mind from what he said before. And what he's saying now is it's all about size. Earlier he said it's all about content. And now he's saying it's all about size. So as long as if it has the size.
Along with content earlier.
So it's
say small, big, it only matters.
Right. So when it comes to right,
the small get contaminated.
Right. So if it's wool and linen, it could. Right. Yeah. Wool and linen. Right. Wool. When it comes to wool and linen. Right. So when it comes to non-wool and linen, size doesn't make a difference. It could be 1,000 amot by 1,000 amot. it could be the largest size of this room, it's not going to receive contamination according before the first opinion. And the only thing about size had to do with wool or linen. Meaning wool or linen, as long as you meet the size of 3 fingers by 3 fingers,
So
if it,
12 fingers didn't mean it, just over 3.
over 3,
Period.
right, exactly.
There's no bigger-
3 or more, then you get into content.
So there's
Meaning 3 or more, meaning if you're wool or linen, once you have 3 or 4 fingers, if you're wool or linen, you receive contamination. If you're not wool or linen, it doesn't make a difference how high, how big you are.
So then there's no concept of 12 by 12.
Right, there's no concept in other materials. Right, in other materials, no concept. Right. But good point. Mark is saying. Mark is saying that by wool or linen, we said it's all about wool or linen. It's 3 fingers, 3 fingers. Where does the 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim come in? Where does the 12? So it only came into play when we needed to add. When the Gemara wanted the Gemara had a question. Even by wool or linen, the Gemara had a question. The Torah says beged. A garment that's wool or linen receives contamination. But what is the word garment? The general, even, garment sounds like a full garment. So the Gemara had a question, how do you know garment sounds like a shirt, a belt, a pair of pants? We needed to go, and the Gemara says we could learn out 3. Good morning, David. Good to see you. The Gemara says we could learn out 3 tfachim by 3, 12 fingers by 12 fingers from a kal v'chomer. The Gemara said we have, because the Torah says that even, there's the warp threads and there's the woof threads, the threads that go this way, the threads that go that way. And even though they're not yet woven into the garment, the Torah says if there is a discoloring of that warp or woof threads, it's subject to contamination. So the Gemara said if the warp or woof threads, which are not yet woven, is subject to contamination, so something which is 3 tvachim by 3 tvachim, which is already woven, the Gemara says that definitely should be receive contamination. But but the 3 fingers, that far, we need a special pasuk to include 3 fingers. And once we include the 3 fingers, then you're right. Then we'll have obviously everything above that is over that is included. Right. It's considered, right. Even the poor man, with right. The Gemara says that a poor man would take a 3 by 3, 3 fingers and use it as a patch. The rich man will throw out the 3 by 3. That's not even significant for the rich. But less than 3 fingers, even he will call scraps, and he will even throw it out. Now, so the Gemara says, Ema. Now the Gemara says, I'm going to suggest that a different shot. That which we said in the name of Rava, that to come to explain that there's no argument, really it wasn't this what we just said, that Rava, in the name of Rava, really it was not Rava. It was Rav Papa. Rav Papa was the one who wanted to show there's no argument between Rabbi Yishmael, this Rabbi Yishmael, and that Rabbi Yishmael. Meaning to say, Rava himself, he went on record and he said that Rabbi Yishmael will not, if it's not wool or linen, it's not subject to contamination, doesn't make a difference what the size is. Not necessarily he changed his mind, but we have a contradiction between this opinion of Rabbi Yishmael and that opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. But Rava himself actually understands the previous statement of Rabbi Yishmael the way we thought until now. He didn't change his mind. That this statement of Rabbi Yishmael holds, if it's not wool or linen, size doesn't make a difference. David, we're talking about contamination and sizes and materials. Certain, is it just subject to wool and linen, or even other types of materials could also receive contamination? Wool and linen is definitely the American Express card. It applies to wool and linen, but we don't know if it applies to other types of to other types of materials. So the Gemara says this, Rava, meaning, because what happened was we recorded Rava's statement that Rava says that Rabbi Yishmael would hold a size makes a difference. That's what we just said. That if it's all about the, if it's, as long as it meets a certain size, if it's large enough, it will receive contamination. And we said, but this is not in agreement with what Rava said before in Rabbi Yishmael. His understanding of Rabbi Yishmael was that it's nothing to do with size, it's all about content. So the Gemara first said, okay, he changed his mind. He changed his mind. Now the Gemara says, the Offer says, no, we're not saying Rava changed his mind. It wasn't Rava who said that it's all about the size. It's Rav Papa who said it. So now Rava, we have no contradiction of Rava on himself, because Rava himself says, Rabbi Shmuel says it's all about content. Yes, according to Rava's understanding, it will be a contradiction of Rabbi Shmuel on Rabbi Shmuel, but it's not a contradiction of Rava on himself, because this now we're saying that Rav Papa is the one. He's right. Rav Papa is the one who said Rava didn't change his mind. Rav Papa says that the two Rabbi Yishmaels are not in contradiction, because one is talking about a certain size, a larger size, then it would receive contamination. But if it's a smaller size and other types of materials, it won't. Okay, very complex Gemara, one of the harder Gemaras that we've learned so far this year. So Richie came to help us out, and David's here to help us out, and everybody else. Okay, we want to wish everyone a beautiful day. We'll be back tomorrow to hopefully same time, same channel. All the best, everybody. Ronnie, have a great day. Ralph, have a great day. You know.